Arriving at the venue in that magical golden hour, with nature starting to wake up, fish activity increasing, and the prospect of a big rudd for the camera. So there's one place within the UK where big rudd are prevalent, and that is in Cambridge. You've got the Fens, you've got the River Cam, and these regularly produce big rudd. And so it was decided we'll go to the River Cam and try to catch one of these big elusive rudd that swim in its waters. The plan was to do 2 days on the River Cam. The approach was a roving approach, minimal kit, just walking up and down the river, trying to find these big rudd, because you know you've got to find them before you fish for them. So there was a lot of walking, a lot of looking, and to be honest, not a lot of fishing. There's no point in casting to fish that aren't really our target size. So the method was to get bread, mash up some bread, and then sort of squeeze it together to take some of the air out of it, and then ball it into the river. Watch that bread as it floats down, keeping an eye on it, and waiting for those big rudd to come up and suck it in. There's thousands of little rudd in the Cam, and they start pecking at the bait as soon as it hits the water, and you can see you can see where they're just pecking at the bait, and then all of a sudden that interests the bigger fish. It effectively attracts them. They know something's there, they know, you know, there's food there, and then they come up and they take the bait. And when that happens, it's so exciting. You know, you're sitting there, beautiful surroundings in Cambridge. You've got a still, calm river that's very slow flowing, almost canal sort of, just flowing really like, and then all of a sudden, bow wave, and then bang, and they hit the bread, and you can see the shoulders come out, or sometimes they just suck it straight from the surface. But you can tell that they're big rudd, and you can always tell when the big rudd have arrived. And that's the time you get your bait out. Tactics for the Cam, really simple. Decided to go with a 14-foot plus acolyte float rod. Fished that with 4.4 pound float line all the way through, straight down to a size 10 hook. I went with the muggler floats in 5 gram. You may see from the video that float slightly undershot, and that was actually done on purpose for a couple of reasons. The first one was when we started fishing in very low light conditions, it's absolutely essential that you could see that float. So just undershot it so I could see the full float. And the other reason was simply to create less of a splash as it hits the water, because the last thing you want to do is have big rudd feeding and you put the float on and they're just going to disperse. Yes, we were overcasting and then dragging it back, but these fish can be very sensitive to even the smallest of disturbances on the water. The muggler floats are great for this sort of situation where you're fishing up in the water layers or actually on top of the water. One of the problems we had during the session was the bird life. You know, not only big rudd like bread, the swans do as well, the black-headed gulls like them, and the ducks like them. At one point I was actually being stalked by a female mallard as I was chucking out bread for the big rudd, and had to hide behind the reeds just to get the bait out without them seeing it. So it was difficult, but you know, these are things in angling you've got to get around in order to catch your fish. Are you having a laugh, aren't you? Walking up and down the river, trying to locate these fish, it's not the easiest of work, let's put it that way. I mean, it was really hot. We've had such a hot summer. Luckily the river wasn't in too bad condition. It was slightly low, but not as bad as we expected. I made the schoolboy error of wearing shorts, and my legs got ripped to pieces. Don't ask me why I thought that was a good idea, but that's, you know, I went with shorts and I suffered for it. But yeah, we walked in that first day, we walked miles. We walked up and down to some good looking spots and covered as much water as we could. As I mentioned, we're trying to find those big rudd, and trying to separate them from the smaller fish which are more prevalent in that water. So yeah, it was a roving approach. It was tough. It wasn't the easiest of sessions, and that first day we actually didn't hook into any big fish. I would make the excuse that the conditions weren't right, but to be honest, they were pretty bang on. So I can't exactly make that excuse, and well, I can say there may have been a slight bit too much wind, because when you're fishing this sort of water and fishing this method, the lighter the wind, the better. You don't want to ripple on the water. You want to be able to see every time a fish surfaces. And when you haven't got a ripple on the water, that's a lot easier. So that's the only excuse I can come up with. But the reality was the conditions were good, we fished hard, and it just didn't happen. So on to day 2, got up really early. I mean, these were long days. I mean, we literally fished from sort of 4 o'clock till like 10 at night on the first day. And the second day we were up at 3, onto the river at dark, and we see a fish surface. You get all excited, it's a decent fish. You know, your heart's pounding now. Got some bread mixed up really quickly and watched it go down. And it didn't take long before bang. And then boom, again, another one. And then it's a matter of getting that bait on your hook quickly and getting it out there. Because usually, within the first sort of minute of the bait being out there, if those fish are there and feeding, which they were, they'll take it. That's what happened. But obviously at this point, you've got, you know, your hands are shaking. So you try to put on the bread, you get it on, pinged it out, and within 30 seconds, that float was away. Slow sinking bread, took it just under the surface, hooked into a fish, and it was a proper one. I'm not going to lie, I was extremely nervous playing this fish. We'd come all the way to Cambridge to fish for and to try catch one of these big elusive rudd that lived there. We'd had a day blanked yesterday, and it was the day before, sorry, and it was kind of all or nothing. So I played it really carefully, as I do. Luckily, the fish didn't play up, and I landed a big bar of Cambridge gold. Our target fish, what we went to Cambridge to catch, yeah, it made our day. It was all the effort. It was all worthwhile in the end. Another early start this morning. Really got them going off the top. Just some slow sinking bread, and this beautiful rudd turned up from the river. Fin perfect. Absolutely stunning fish. Big rudd are extremely rare creatures in the UK. The waters that contain them are they're limited, let's put it that way, and it takes an awful amount of homework to actually find the venue before you can fish for them. Now, I'd heard about one particular water up north. This was actually located in Scunthorpe. It was Neville Ficklin, the legendary predator angler's lake up north, and the logistics of fishing it were not simple. It was a 4.5, 5 hour journey for me from my home, so it was always going to be a long session scenario where I would have to go and fish for 3 to 5 days at a time to make the most of it. There'd been some huge rudd caught from this particular venue, and again, these fish, it's low stock. The reality is you have 35 acres of water and you're potentially fishing for 20, maybe 30 fish. So it is a bit of a bait and wait tactic, and that's the tactics that I employed on this particular session. You know, it was always going to be a water that took a bit of working out. You know, it took a while to get a feel for the place, but I was quite fortunate to have one of, you know, a session of a lifetime really, catching some big rudd. The initial tactics were the sort of bait and wait, I'm afraid to say it, but bite alarms and bait runners, as I mentioned, extremely low stock. So, you know, you really have to make the most of that. And that approach is ideal. However, I had been walking around during the day with a float rod, trying to locate some of these big rudd in the margins. It was a reed lined, beautiful place. And I hadn't actually had no success with that. And I'd got back to my swim and I chucked out 2 of my feeders at distance over a bit of bait, ready for that evening spell. And I had the float rod there and I decided to keep baiting a likely looking margin with corn. And I could see there was quite a lot of small rudd in this lake. And I kept on baiting up, hoping that, you know, some big ones might turn up or they might create some interest by feeding on this sweet corn. And I continued to do that, and then I got the float out. So it's sort of prime time now, and it went straight away. From memory, because this was a few years ago now, I caught a small rudd, probably of about 8 ounce. A nice fish though. And so I thought, oh, that's promising. I'll keep going with this and see what happens. Bit more bait, little and often, just catapulting sweet corn out over the float, and then it sailed away. And I bent into this fish, and straight away, you know, this is a proper one. This is what I'm here for. All of that blanking could finally come to a resolution, and I could be holding my dream fish. Playing it really carefully. Scooped it up in the net. I mean, those big bars of gold when they come up, they're absolutely spectacular. Gets the heart going completely. And looked in the net, made up. Wasn't the largest in the world, but it was definitely the sort of stamp of fish that we were after, and or I was after, and it was a 2.8. Hadn't weighed it at that time. You know, experience tells me there's big fish there. They hang around in shoals of age groups. So usually where you get one big fish, there's a few others knocking about with it. So got the float straight back out immediately. I'm fishing up in the water, by the way, here, so they're kind of taking it on the drop. You know, that's why you bait little and often, to keep them interested, get them competing for the bait. The float's gone down again straight away. Bang, I'm in. This one felt even better. So I've got 2.8 in the net, and now I'm playing another decent fish, and I knew that some of these fish went up to over 4 pounds. So my heart was literally in my mouth. I mean, it was exciting stuff. Played this fish, a massive bar of gold came up, scooped it up in the net, and looked down, and I could see it next to the other one, and it was bigger. So I thought, right, okay, that looks like it could go free. Unhooked it, got it straight back out. Bang. Within, oh, it must have been within a minute, the float's gone again. Struck into a fish, and this one has felt even bigger. You know when they're big fish because they sort of plod about. And a massive bar of gold came up, netted it with the other 2, and it was bigger than the previous one I caught. So I kind of caught them in order, and they got bigger every time. I tried to catch some more following that, but they had moved on, and that sort of a manic spell had ended. But, you know, once I had them on the mat and they were weighed up, the first one was 2.8, the second one was 3.1, and the third one was an enormous 3.10. So to catch a brace of 3's on the float was truly special. It's a moment that I won't forget in my angling, and I doubt I'll ever replicate. I was a little bit secretive at the time about how I caught these fish. It was, you know, there were some very special fish to be had in this particular lake, and a lot of the people fishing for the rudd were using sort of traditional specimen tactics, which were the feeders, and so was I. But it was hard-earned. Catching them on the float, I thought I cracked it, but the reality was I hadn't, and I spent many other sessions trying to catch them on the float, and that just didn't pay off. But to end up my time on that water, I had one other session up there, and I managed a stunning 3 pound 7 ounce rudd, and that was on traditional feeder tactics, and was a great way to end my time on that particular water.